I worked at that cafe for 6 years, and when they closed the doors for the last time, I felt like my entire world had collapsed around me. My family needed my income desperately because my father had lost his job. My sister was trying to go back to college, and I was the one keeping everyone afloat with my small wages from serving tea and pastries to the same familiar faces every single day. The pressure to find something new fell entirely on my shoulders, and I had no idea what kind of work I could possibly do, since I had never really done anything else with my life, except pour tea and wipe down tables in that cozy little cafe that no longer existed. When I went to the job center feeling absolutely desperate, they showed me a position as a caregiver for someone named Will Trainer, and even though I had absolutely no experience with caregiving or anything medical, I went to the interview at this massive castle-like estate that belonged to his wealthy family. I remember sitting there in front of his mother, Camilla, trying to seem confident and competent when I was neither of those things. And then my skirt ripped because it was too tight, and I felt mortified. But somehow I managed to convince her that I was a fast learner who lived nearby and never got sick and could make an excellent cup of tea. She hired me for a 6-month contract, and I later learned that I was just one in a long line of caregivers who had tried and failed to connect with her son. But my family needed the money so badly that I could not afford to fail. The first time I walked into that annex building where Will lived, I met Nathan, his nurse, who explained that my job was not really about the physical care since he handled all the medical aspects, but rather about being a companion and friend to Will, someone who could hopefully lift his spirits and make him want to engage with the world again. Will had been a successful banker and an incredibly active athlete before a motorcycle hit him while he was crossing the street in the rain 2 years earlier, and the accident left him completely paralyzed from the neck down, unable to move or do any of the things that had once defined his entire existence. When I first tried to talk to him and be cheerful and friendly, he was cold and bitter and dismissive, making it clear that he had no interest in my colorful outfits or my attempts at conversation, and I genuinely considered quitting because I could not stand the way he looked at me with such contempt. My sister Trina begged me not to give up on the job because she desperately wanted to continue her education, and our family could not survive without my income. So I forced myself to go back day after day, even though Will made it abundantly clear that he found me annoying and superficial. Things got even worse when his ex-girlfriend Alicia came to visit and announced that she was going to marry Rupert, who had been Will's best friend before the accident, and I could see how much that news devastated him, even though he tried to hide it behind his usual wall of cynicism and sarcasm. Alicia told me that you can only help someone who actually wants to be helped, and it seemed pretty obvious that Will had no interest in being helped by anyone, least of all by someone like me who knew nothing about his world of high finance and extreme sports and sophisticated culture. One day he told me that he was sick of looking at my gaudy costumes and that he did not want to see me anymore. And instead of backing down and apologizing like all his previous caregivers probably had, I told him that I was employed by his mother and I was staying whether he liked it or not because I really needed this job. I also told him that I was not going to indulge his self-pity or treat him like he was made of glass just because he was in a wheelchair. And I think that honesty surprised him enough that he actually started talking to me like I was a real person, instead of just another annoyance he had to tolerate. He made me watch French films with him, even though I complained that I did not like reading subtitles, and he called me narrow-minded and provincial, and I called him a snob, and somehow those arguments became the foundation of an actual friendship. Nathan explained to me that Will would never get better, that all the exercises and medical treatments were just to prevent his muscles from deteriorating further, and to manage his extremely unstable blood pressure and his vulnerability to infections that could turn serious very quickly. I learned how to help when his temperature spiked, because his body could not regulate heat the way other people's bodies could. And one day I noticed scars on his wrists, and realized with horror that he had tried to end his own life before, probably more than once. We started having real conversations where I told him about my life in this small town where I had never really gone anywhere, or done anything except work at the cafe, and date my boyfriend Patrick, who was obsessed with running marathons, and seemed to have very little interest in me as an actual person. I shared with Will how I had received an offer to study fashion at a college in Manchester years ago, but turned it down because my family needed me to stay home and earn money, and he seemed genuinely angry on my behalf that I had given up on my dreams so easily. He started encouraging me to think bigger and want more from my life, telling me that I had a duty to live as fully as possible and experience everything the world had to offer instead of just accepting the small, safe existence I had built for myself in this tiny town. I found myself looking forward to our time together, enjoying his dry wit and his intelligence, and the way he seemed to actually see me as someone interesting and worthwhile, even though I had never accomplished anything remarkable. Then one afternoon I overheard an argument between his parents, and I learned the devastating truth that Will had made them promise him 6 months to see if anything changed, and if it did not, they would take him to a place called Dignitas in Switzerland where he could choose to end his life on his own terms, because he simply could not accept living the rest of his existence unable to move or be independent or do any of the things that had made him feel alive. His mother, Camilla, was fighting desperately to change his mind, but his father, Stephen, seemed resigned to respecting Will's decision, even though it was tearing their family apart. When I realized that I had been hired specifically to try to make Will want to live, that my entire purpose was to somehow convince him that his life was still worth living, I felt this crushing weight of responsibility combined with absolute determination that I was not going to let him give up without a fight. I threw myself into planning adventures and outings to show Will that there was still joy and beauty and excitement to be found in the world, even from a wheelchair, even with all his physical limitations. We went to the horse races even though I had no idea what I was doing, and everything went wrong because I had not planned properly and had not thought to ask Will for his input, which he rightfully pointed out was incredibly presumptuous of me. We went to a Mozart concert where I wore a red dress and felt elegant and sophisticated for the first time in my life, and I could see Will watching me with something that looked like admiration. We attended his ex-girlfriend Alicia's wedding to Rupert, and instead of being devastated like I feared he would be, Will seemed almost liberated, like he was finally letting go of that part of his past. My boyfriend Patrick became increasingly jealous of the time I was spending with Will, demanding that I pay more attention to him and his training schedule and his needs, but I found that I simply did not care anymore about Patrick or our relationship that had always been more about convenience than actual love. Eventually, Patrick and I broke up after he discovered that I was planning to accompany Will on a trip to California, to a ranch that specialized in adventures for people with spinal cord injuries, though that trip never happened because Will caught pneumonia after pushing himself too hard at the wedding. I felt terrible guilt that my encouragement for him to have fun and live fully had resulted in him getting so sick, watching him fight the infection, while knowing that his compromised body made every illness a potentially serious threat. When Will recovered, I planned a last-minute trip to Mauritius instead, this beautiful tropical paradise where the three of us, Will and Nathan and I, spent 10 incredible days surrounded by crystal blue water and white sand beaches. I had fallen completely in love with Will by this point, and I could tell that he felt the same way about me from the way he looked at me and the conversations we had late into the night about dreams and fears and what it meant to truly live. On our last night there, we finally kissed, and it felt like everything I had been working toward for months had led to this perfect moment where I was sure that I had succeeded in changing his mind and making him want to stay. Then Will pulled away from me and told me that he still intended to go through with his plan to go to Switzerland, that his decision had nothing to do with not loving me because he did love me, but rather that he wanted me to live a full life instead of spending my youth taking care of someone who could never give me the kind of relationship I deserved. I felt like he had physically struck me, like everything we had built together meant nothing, and I yelled at him and left, and refused to speak to him for the rest of the trip. When we returned home, I quit my job as his caregiver and told him I never wanted to see him again because I could not bear to watch him give up when I knew in my heart that his life had value and meaning and that we could have had something beautiful together despite all the obstacles. My father eventually convinced me to go see Will one more time, to at least say goodbye properly instead of leaving things so broken between us. But when I arrived at the estate, I learned that he had already left for Switzerland. I immediately booked a flight and followed him there, unable to let him face those final moments alone, even though I was still angry and heartbroken, and desperately wishing he would change his mind. I sat with him at the clinic and held his hand, and told him that I loved him, and he told me that he loved me too, but that this was the choice he needed to make for himself, the one decision he could still control in a life where he had lost control of everything else. After Will passed away, I returned home feeling completely lost and empty, unable to imagine how I was supposed to move forward without him in my world. Several weeks later, I received a letter that he had written before he went to Switzerland, and I read it while sitting in his favorite cafe in Paris, a city I had never visited before but that he had always wanted to show me. In the letter, He told me that he had left me a significant amount of money with the specific instruction that I use it to follow my dreams and pursue my education and travel and experience everything that life had to offer. He wrote that he wanted me to live boldly and abundantly, to honor his memory by becoming the fullest version of myself instead of staying small and safe in my hometown like I had been doing before I met him. Sitting in that Parisian cafe with tears streaming down my face, I realized that Will had given me an incredible gift. Not just the money, but the belief that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined for myself. He had shown me that I deserved to want things and chase dreams, and refuse to settle for a life that felt too small for the person I could become. Even though I wished with every fiber of my being that he was still alive, that we could have found a way to build a future together, I understood that his choice had been about reclaiming his autonomy and dignity in the only way he felt was still available to him. I promised myself that I would honor his final wish by living the kind of expansive, adventurous life he had always encouraged me to pursue, carrying his love and his belief in me forward into whatever came next.